So not only did I relocate to Winston-Salem from the suburbs of Chicago 4 years ago, but through making these videos the last few years, I've talked to hundreds of others looking to do the same thing. I've come across some common things that surprise people about moving to and living in Winston-Salem. So I've made a list of 7 things that often surprise people about living here. Now, some of these things are going to be pleasant surprises. Some of them are going to be not so much. We're going to talk about all of them right now. The last surprise on this list, and no, it's not going to be the people, I've beat that enough, but the last surprise on this list is a really good one, so stick around to the end. But if you really want to dig into living in Winston-Salem, check out Living in Winston-Salem online on the web and also on Instagram. We have detailed neighborhood guides, interesting articles about living here published every week, and the best newsletter in the city, in my opinion. And if you need help buying or selling real estate in Winston-Salem or anywhere in the area, my contact information is below. Let's get right into it. The first thing that really surprises people about moving to and living in Winston-Salem are sidewalks, or really the lack thereof. A lot of neighborhoods in Winston-Salem and the suburbs just don't have sidewalks. Even neighborhoods that have a lot of families and things like that in them, where you'd think they would be really common, there's just not a lot of sidewalks here. I'm not really sure why that is. It's just tends to be the road and then the grass in a lot of areas. And then even in some neighborhoods where there are sidewalks, they'll only have them on one side of the street. Again, not really sure the reason why, but that just seems to be the case in much of Winston-Salem and the suburbs. Now, there are suburbs like Louisville where they have a new rule for all new developments have to have sidewalks, which makes it a little bit nicer, more walkable. But in many parts of the city and suburbs, you're just simply not going to find a lot of sidewalks. So if that's something that's really important to you, you should definitely take note of that. But do know that a lot of people, they just walk and ride their bikes right on the side of the road. The people are used to it. The cars in the neighborhood are used to seeing people walk on the streets and stuff like that. So it's not a huge deal, but definitely is a change of pace if you come from an area or you're really looking to have sidewalks throughout the neighborhood. Next surprise about living in Winston-Salem, if you're thinking about moving here, and this is actually for the whole state of North Carolina, is our due diligence process. North Carolina is called a caveat emptor, or buyer beware state. Simply what that means is our contracts in North Carolina, we're one of only a few states like this, they don't have built-in buyer protections. They don't have an inspection contingency or appraisal contingency or any contingencies in it for that matter. What you do in North Carolina is you have a due diligence process, and that comes with a due diligence fee. Basically, what you're doing is you're offering money and pretty much buying your inspection period. During that inspection period or due diligence period, you have a chance to walk away for any reason or for no reason at all for the transaction. The surprising part of it, though, is that due diligence fee that you pay directly to the seller. That's another thing that's different. You might have heard it like an earnest money deposit or something like that before, but this we're talking about is a due diligence fee. So that's paid by the buyer directly to the seller to buy that due diligence period. If you walk away for any reason or no reason at all, you do not get that due diligence fee back. So that's kind of like your commitment money. It's a way to say, I'm going forward with this transaction. Here's what I'm offering to the seller to take the property off the market, to have it under contract so I can conduct my due diligence. Now, the amount of that fee and the time of that due diligence period, it's all negotiable. It can be 0 to whatever you want it to be. So as a buyer, you can be putting up significant money to get the property under contract, and sellers are looking for bigger due diligence fees. And when we were in that red hot market a couple years ago, we were seeing due diligence fees of $25,000, $35,000, $50,000 on some properties. It was just crazy. It's definitely calmed down now, but it still is competitive. Generally, that fee is, 1 to 2% of the purchase price, but again, it's negotiable. It can go up or down either way depending on a lot of circumstances, but it is non-refundable. So that definitely takes some people by surprise. If you need help with that, give me a call or shoot me an email. We can talk more in detail, but that's a thing that really surprises people about living in Winston-Salem or moving here. The third thing that's a surprise about moving to and living in Winston-Salem is the closing costs here tend to be much lower than many other states. I sold real estate in Illinois as well before I moved here, and the closing costs in Winston-Salem are much, much lower than they were there. They're much lower than a lot of other places, which is a pleasant surprise. Now, this is not taking into account any lender fees or lender closing costs. I'm just talking about the costs. Say if you were paying cash on a property here, the closing costs are much lower. We use attorneys to close in North Carolina. We don't have title companies that do our closings. We do order title insurance, but we have an attorney fee that's generally $700 to $900. The seller pays the transfer tax on the property itself. And then you'll have, title insurance to make sure you have clear title on the property, which is very important, which is around $500. Then you're going to have some miscellaneous recording fees, some prorations for taxes or HOAs and things like that. But overall, the closing costs in North Carolina are generally much, much lower than many other states, which is a pleasant surprise. The fourth thing that surprises people about living here, if they're thinking about moving, is HOAs. We have a lot of HOAs in Winston-Salem and the surrounding areas. I will talk to people often where they want to avoid HOAs at all costs because they have some horror stories and nightmare stories, and I heard those same things in Chicago. I will just tell you that while there are many HOAs here, they're different than a lot of those places that you might be comparing them to. Now again, this is going to vary a lot depending on, if you're buying a condo or townhouse or if you're just in a single family home with an HOA, but some of these are just a few $100s a year to help with like streetlight maintenance or common area maintenance. It could be $30 a month. I just recently sold a townhouse where the HOA fees were $13 a month, all the way up to, a couple hundred plus if they're doing all the, lawn maintenance and everything like that. So it can really vary widely, but the thing to know, while there are many more, it's more common, it's generally not the big overbearing HOAs that you may be thinking of. It's just a simple set of guidelines to set standards for the neighborhood. You can't park cars in your front yard and different things like, just standards to keep the neighborhood looking nice, or for common area maintenance or street lights, sometimes road maintenance and things like that, but generally more laid back than a lot of the HOAs that you might have heard of before. So when I talk to people about moving here and they say, I don't want an HOA because they have some terrible stories that I understand, just know that if you absolutely don't want an HOA, no matter what, you're going to limit your choice of homes, which is fine. Just understand that going in, and just also understand that the HOAs here tend not to be overbearing and really into like, oh, you can't paint your house this color. It's not generally like that. The next surprise that people have about living in moving to Winston-Salem is that it can get rural pretty quickly when you get outside of the center of town. Now this can be a good surprise or a not good surprise depending on how you look at it. But you have neighborhoods like Ardmore, West End, Buena Vista, things like that, where it's kind of more like a city neighborhood feel that you would expect. But you get a few minutes outside of town and it gets to be open, green, a lot of space in between small towns and things like that. So just know that it can get rural outside of town pretty quickly. On the plus side of that, you can be outside of town where homes tend to be a little bit less money. You get a little bit more square foot for the dollar and still be into downtown Winston-Salem in 20 minutes or so. And maybe this is a downside or not, but I talk to people a lot. I want to be within 30 minutes of downtown. Well, I can tell you 30 minutes from downtown, depending which way you're going, can be out in almost the middle of nowhere. I mean, you can not have a lot of neighbors if that's your thing. So just know that if you're thinking about moving here and you have your radius within 30 minutes, it can be really varied. 30 minutes going east, you can be in Greensboro, you can go through Kernersville and all those things like that. 30 minutes west, you can be in wine country. So 30 minutes here is a really big radius. It's really gonna vary a lot, but it does get rural quickly. So you will have a lot of space like in between these towns. I've talked about it in other videos where if you're going from like Kernersville to back to Winston-Salem, you're gonna have that stretch of highway that's just a lot of open green space. It can feel like you're driving forever when really it's only 20 minutes, but the towns can be a little bit spread out and it can get rural pretty quick. The sixth thing that tends to surprise people about moving to and living in Winston-Salem is much lower property taxes than where they've come from. I can definitely attest to this coming from Illinois, where $10,000 property taxes were very common on average price homes. And if you're moving from, Connecticut, New York, or California, places like that where they're known for sky-high property taxes, living in Winston-Salem will definitely be a pleasant surprise when it comes to the property tax department. Now generally, don't hold me to this, but generally, property taxes are a little less than 1% of the purchase price. The county and city has their own way to assess them, which they do every few years. They reassess them. But generally, a decent rule of thumb is about 1% of the purchase price, a little bit less than 1%. Some places are going to be much less than 1%, where you can buy, a $400,000 house and pay $2,000 in property taxes. Some are going to be a little bit more than 1% of the purchase price, but 1% or less is a great general rule of thumb. Now you can see most of this stuff online. The difference is going to be if you're buying new construction. In Winston-Salem, on new construction, property taxes are based on the lot value only when you first purchase, simply because the structure is not there for the city to come and do an assessment on. So when you see, $500,000 new construction and you're looking on Zillow or whatever, and you see property taxes are $480, just know it's not going to stay like that, but use that as a general guide of kind of where it's going to be. But again, nice thing is generally much, much less than people expect in property taxes, which has a direct impact on your payment, which is great when prices and interest rates are so high like they are right now. Property taxes being lower are definitely going to help you out. So the seventh and last surprise people have about moving to and living in Winston-Salem is Southern charm. And I will say, I talk to people that are living in Raleigh and Charlotte, and while their common complaint is that it almost has no Southern charm, it's almost gone, let me tell you that it is alive and well in Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem has a great blend of people that are from here and people that are not from here. It's a really good melting pot environment, and Southern charm is definitely still alive all throughout the city, from the way that they support small businesses to historic Old Salem, some of the old and new architecture that's here. It just really makes the area charming overall. It has a great blend of history, lush greenery, again, modern and old architecture, all with an eye towards the future. It makes Winston-Salem really a unique and charming place to live. If you need help buying or selling real estate, I'd love to be a resource for you. You can email me directly at jeff@govalentino.com. Thanks.